Amid growing threats to federal funding and questions surrounding how your tax dollars are being spent, Maryland's financial future is uncertain.
I think there's a low chance of us having a special session at the moment.
I'm going in depth on the state's economic outlook and the potential impacts on you. Plus, a scathing state audit reveals the State Highway Administration knowingly spent more than $300 million on unauthorized projects.
This mistake is probably going to cost Maryland taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars.
A closer look at how taxpayers could end up footing the bill. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost. A scathing state audit alleges major waste, fraud, and abuse inside the State Highway Administration. According to the report, the SHA charged hundreds of millions of dollars in unauthorized expenses to federal projects. The audit is raising serious questions about how the State Highway Administration billed Maryland taxpayers and the federal government for those projects. The State Highway Administration is responsible for maintaining more than 5,200 miles of roadway in Maryland. While that's only 20% of the total roadway in the state, the SHA maintained roads represent 70% of the total miles traveled by vehicle. How projects get funded to maintain those roadways is the focus of this audit from the Office of Legislative Audits. What started from a tip to the Waste, Fraud, and Abuse Hotline, the report reveals the SHA routinely charged expenses to federal fund projects not authorized by the federal government, totaling nearly $360 million that may need to be funded out of the state's coffers, like the Transportation Trust Fund. The audit also found between June 2024 and August 2025, unauthorized spending increased 3,523%, and the SHA was unable to provide documentation to support the propriety of accrued federal fund revenue totaling $449 million. Beyond the federal expense problems, the audit found the SHA did not have overtime policies to monitor limits, resulting in 128 employees receiving overtime payments 50% or more of their regular base salary, including 9 people who made more in overtime than their regular salaries.
Look at this report. This is a multi-level problem.
David Williams, president of the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, says the audit reveals real cracks within the Department of Transportation as a whole and deep-rooted issues that will end up costing taxpayers.
This is not a simple mistake. And this mistake is probably going to cost Maryland taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars. And it's no surprise when you look at a Department of Transportation that is facing a shortfall of billions of dollars over the next few years, you see why this happened, is that they were trying to have their transportation projects but not fund it, and using these gimmicks and really lying.
The State Highway Administration refutes the claim that projects were not authorized, but it does admit expenses did exceed the initial authorized amount, adding no expenses were purposefully miscoded for federal funding. But the explanation not good enough for Republicans. House Minority Leader Jason Buckles says this is a stunning budget shortfall, arguing Democrats and Governor Wes Moore have imposed massive tax and fee increases on Maryland drivers to close gaps in the Transportation Trust Fund. To now be told there has been an ongoing effort bordering on malfeasance to hide the true breadth of that deficit is incredibly disturbing. The Attorney General must review the findings. Williams agrees with Republicans that Attorney General Anthony Brown should take a deep dive into the findings.
The Attorney General needs to investigate because it's highly likely that multiple people were involved in this. This probably isn't just one rogue employee. This is probably going to involve a number of employees at the Department of Transportation. And whoever was involved in this, they need to be reprimanded and potentially fired because this is a really deep problem.
In a statement to Fox 45 News, Democrat Senator Clarence Lamb, a member of the Joint Audit and Evaluations Committee, says the audit's findings warrant further review by the legislature, adding in part, "We have to get to the bottom of why and how this happened."
Is there any debate? But this program is different.
Because we literally have hundreds of people in our district.
Lawmakers passed a balanced budget during the General Assembly session, which is a constitutional requirement. But a structural deficit remains a concern for next year, and Lamb says the audit will only make it more difficult to balance our budget while meeting our ongoing transportation infrastructure needs. We reached out to Governor Moore's office for comment on the findings of the audit. In a lengthy statement, a spokesperson for the governor's office says the SHA follows routine, federally approved accounting processes when determining how and when activities are charged to federal accounts. Adding in part, the SHA is actively advancing reimbursement and is working with the federal government. The governor's team, the agency has added staff and training, completed new systems so managers have improved information for projects, and developed a slew of new protocols. Does he owe taxpayers a response or an explanation?
This is not a mistake. This is deliberate. And the governor of Maryland needs to tell taxpayers and all citizens of Maryland how this happened, why this happened, and what's being done to correct the situation. There needs to be 100% transparency here.
Now, I reached out to the Office of Attorney General to ask about some Republican lawmakers' calls for an investigation into the SHA audit. A spokesperson responded in a statement saying the audit found procedural issues which require the agency to take corrective action, but the report did not find anything warranting a referral to the Attorney General. The statement goes on to suggest the Office of Legislative Audits or the administration should handle further review, not the Attorney General. We invited the State Highway Administration to join us for an interview, but they said they could not accommodate one. But they did send us a written response. That statement we received from the SHA is the same as the statement we received from the governor's office. Now, a search is underway for a permanent leader of the Department of Transportation after the governor's office announced Maryland Transportation Secretary Paul Wiedefeld was stepping down earlier this summer. Wiedefeld had a decades-long career in transportation, including 6 years as the head of the D.C. Metro and 2 years as head of Maryland's DOT. Though his departure was announced in early July, Wiedefeld did not officially leave his position until August 1st. It's not clear why he left, but Delegate Pippy suggests these latest findings from the State Highway Administration audit could have played a part.
There's some significant concerns here. And, you know, I want to know what the administration knew about this. I mean, obviously, somebody knew something. I mean, the Secretary of Transportation was let go quietly and randomly, but now maybe it wasn't so random. You know, maybe they knew about this and he's the fall guy. You know, I'm not sure.
We reached out to the governor's office several times about Wiedefeld's departure. They acknowledged our request, but did not answer the questions. Joining me now to talk about the state's audit and what actions he wants to see is Maryland House Minority Whip Jesse Pippy. Thank you so much for your time, Delegate. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with your initial takeaway from the audit. What do you think this means for taxpayers across the state?
Well, the word that popped out most was unrecoverable. So in the audit, obviously the audit was done by the nonpartisan Department of Legislative Services, and they said that up to $449 million was potentially unrecoverable, which means it's going to be on the backs of the taxpayers.
And so when we talk about on the backs of taxpayers, do you think that looking to next year's General Assembly, there's the possibility of potentially more tax increases or fee increases to make up for the gap in this funding?
Well, the problem is it's in the numbers, right? So even our Transportation Trust Fund only has $400 million in it. So it's not even enough money to cover the losses. And that is what is so alarming about this, is just the staggering dollar amount, almost $500 million that we don't have. As you know, Mackenzie, earlier this year, they passed the largest tax increase in Maryland history, and that's because they ran out of money. And so here we now have another potentially $449 million hole that the taxpayers are going to have to fill.
And when we're talking about the Transportation Trust Fund, I mean, going through the legislative process and during the budgeting season, there's a lot of conversation about putting money into the Transportation Trust Fund. Is there reason for concern for you as a lawmaker to have questions about how much money is really in there, given the findings of this audit?
Well, I got to tell you, every day something else comes out. And so as we're kind of siphoning through this audit, the money has to come from somewhere. We're not the federal government. We don't have the ability to print money. The money that goes into the state comes from the taxpayers. And so anytime there's an error, or in this case, what appears to be an intentional error of nearly $500 million, that money has to come from somewhere. And based on what I've seen from this administration, is it's likely going to come from the taxpayers.
Well, and when you're talking about money for projects, is there a concern that projects that have already been given the green light, where the funding is coming from the TTF, that might be on the chopping block given the financial concerns that we're seeing come from this audit?
Right. So federal law actually permits states to essentially advance the funds, right? And so what you have is a scenario where under a false hope that we were going to get reimbursed, we've done a lot of these projects, or started a lot of these projects. And so that's the big concern, is that the money's been spent. And now the entity, the federal government that allegedly was going to reimburse us, is likely not going to. And that's the big issue, is that we've spent the money. Now we're not getting repaid for it. And so the money's going to have to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, it's going to be the taxpayer.
How long do you think that this type of activity, if this was, as the audit said, kind of knowingly doing this, how long was this happening within the SHA or the broader umbrella of the DOT?
Sure. So, I mean, we looked at the dates, right? Just to be fair, we didn't know if this was an ongoing thing from previous administrations, but it was supercharged under the existing administration. Matter of fact, there was a 3,252% increase in unauthorized requests under the current administration. And that is what is so alarming. How could someone knowingly request hundreds of millions of dollars that weren't there, weren't authorized, were never authorized? And that is the problem. We think it's gross negligence or potentially fraud. So that's why we asked the Attorney General to get involved. We're hoping that they do, because this is serious business.
What do you want to see or hear from the governor at this point from the findings of this? Do you want to hear him kind of talk about this and say that this is a problem?
Look, the governor doesn't work for State Highway Administration, but he is the chief executive of our state, and there needs to be accountability. If people in his administration screwed up, he needs to come out and say so. We haven't heard anything, not from him, not from Attorney Anthony Brown. There needs to be accountability, and at the end of the day, the buck stops with the governor. It's his administration, his department.
I don't think that this issue is going away, and I'm sure we will be talking about this in January when the General Assembly resumes. But Delegate Pippy, I appreciate your time. We're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mackenzie.
We reached out to all 20 members of the Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee for their response to the SHA audit. We asked the Joint Chair, Senator Shelley Hettleman, and Delegate Jared Solomon to join us for an interview, but they both said they were unavailable. Spokespersons for the Senators Joanne Benson and Cheryl Kagan reached out to let us know they were out of the office and could not respond to our request for comment. We did hear back from other members of the committee. Delegate Stephen Arntz responded in a statement saying, in part, he asked questions about who in the department is accountable and that each administration has blamed audit issues on the previous administration. He goes on to say he wants to ensure taxpayers are protected and see a firm set of business practices in place to protect taxpayer dollars. We also heard back from Delegate Courtney Watson, who told us the Joint Audit Committee would automatically have a hearing. She says she's planning to reach out to the SHA and Appropriations Committee Chair Ben Barnes directly with her own questions. The Joint Audit and Evaluation Committee's next hearing is scheduled for September 30th. It's not clear what exactly they will discuss, but we will keep you updated on the latest out of that committee as this controversy unfolds. Senate Republican leaders are also calling for more accountability, releasing a statement about what they call a series of damaging audits under the Moore administration. They're responding to both the SHA audit as well as another recent audit into the Department of Human Services Social Services Administration, revealing the SSA does not have procedures in place to keep people with criminal backgrounds away from kids under state care. Senate Minority Leader Stephen Hershey says normally not hearing from the governor about the failures outlined in these audits would speak volumes, but he feels assured Governor Moore would just blame those findings on previous administrations. Senate Minority Whip Justin Reedy adds the audits show a disturbing lack of oversight and leadership at the highest levels of the Moore administration. Still to come, amid growing financial concerns, Maryland's budget is hanging in the balance. A closer look at the state's economic outlook and whether lawmakers might reconvene for a special session.
I'm Chief Alberg. What have we got?
We may have a murder.
Let's find him.
Your success rate is superb.
I have 4 new towns to cover. You just had to be so good at your job, didn't you?
You want to solve everyone's crimes. You have no idea what you're up against.
And whatever it is, we're better together.
Then bring it on.
Keep up the good work.
No rest for the wicked.
Returns Tuesday, September 23rd on Baltimore's Fox 45.
Seasons change, and so do your comfort needs. Get a $69 seasonal tune-up from Blue Dot. Make sure your HVAC system is running at peak efficiency, right when you need it most. Call 1-800-BLUE-DOT to schedule your appointment today.
Like a relentless weed, moderate to severe ulcerative colitis symptoms can keep coming back. Break away to what's possible with Tremfya, with rapid relief at 4 weeks. Many people experienced remission at 1 and even 2 years. Some saw 100% visible healing of their intestinal lining. Serious allergic reactions and increased risk of infections and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, your doctor should check you for infections and TB. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or if you need a vaccine. Healing is possible with Tremfya. Tremfya is now approved for Crohn's disease. Ask your doctor about Tremfya.
New customers bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel, play your game.
Check their new game day fit. Oh, snap! DirecTV got hot.
That's right. DirecTV is flexing with all those pro and college games at your fingertips. This ain't your dad's cable, son. It's Couture.
Okay, thank you so much. I was about to say that. It's Couture.
Blue Dot is recognizing community heroes, and we need your help. As part of the ARS Cares program, we're rewarding a deserving community hero with the chance to win a free HVAC system or water heater. Nominate your community hero by visiting ars.com/ars-cares.
This past legislative session, lawmakers were up against a $3 billion budget deficit. They managed to pass a balanced budget, which is a constitutional requirement, but there are still concerns about Maryland's financial outlook, both this fiscal year and moving forward. Those doubts come as the chief economist at Moody's Credit Ratings warned Maryland is one of 21 states at a high risk of recession. Earlier this year, Moody's downgraded Maryland's credit rating below AAA for the first time in 50 years. Moody's chief economist says Maryland, D.C., and some neighboring states could go through recessions partly because of President Trump's slashing of the federal workforce, while others argue it could be a result of Governor Moore's budget plan.
The last 2.5 years have been tough on Maryland. Many people have moved out. Job creation has not been strong. And of course, we got that debt downgrade.
Part of the governor's budget plan, an additional $1.6 billion in tax and fees to close that $3 billion budget deficit. Those hikes took effect July 1st. They include increasing the vehicle excise tax, doubling the emissions inspection fee, raising taxes on cannabis, and the controversial 3% tax on data and IT services. That tech tax has many business owners worried about their companies and considering moving out of state.
It's not something any of us can budget for.
We're shrinking as a state, and you need to grow. And to grow, you have to, the expression is money goes where it's welcome. Right? And we don't welcome money here. We push it out of state.
Critics worry even mass tax and fee hikes might not be enough to close the budget deficit if the Trump administration pulls federal funding for the state of Maryland. If that happens, lawmakers would need to return later this year for a special session to balance the budget. Senate President Bill Ferguson says he thinks that is unlikely, but not impossible.
I think there's a low chance of us having a special session at the moment. Things are so unpredictable. I mean, I would say every week something else changes that creates a new threat from the federal government for the state of Maryland. And so nothing is off the table. I would say it's a low probability, but not a zero probability.
Maryland's Bureau of Revenue Estimates is set to meet on Thursday, September 25th, so we may learn more soon about this year's budget and whether a special session could be necessary. Joining me now to talk about the budget is taxpayer advocate David Williams. David, thank you for joining us. I want to start with the SHA audit and all of those findings that were included in the report. The first question is, how does something like this happen that seemed to have been going on for many years?
Good evening, and this is obviously a major problem because there's problems on both sides of the ledger book, right? Is the expenses that the state was charging to federal fund projects, but also the revenue that it was claiming that it was getting in. And I think people need to understand that this wasn't done by mistake. And listen, we've seen expenses to federal projects before, but not to the extent of $350 million. And there's something wrong inside the Department of Transportation because this is not one person. This is multiple people that are dealing with the books. So I think that's the problem here, is that this is a multi-layer problem, a multi-level problem, but also a multi-person problem within the Department of Transportation because they were hiding this information, Mackenzie. They were manipulating this information, and that should be of concern to the governor and everyone in Maryland.
Do you think that it matters that this audit was sparked by a hotline tip to the Waste, Fraud, and Abuse hotline for the Office of Legislative Audits? This wasn't something that was discovered during a routine audit of various agencies?
Yeah, that scares me, is that it took a whistleblower to point this out because this is something that should have been flagged months and months ago. And that's why, there needs to be a routine audit of the Department of Transportation, but really all agencies. Is this happening in other agencies? Now, obviously, Department of Transportation, we see the trust fund, has a huge deficit. So we know why this was happening. Obviously, we don't like why it was happening, but we know why it was happening because Maryland wanted to spend money on transportation, but they didn't want to be responsible for it. But what's fascinating about this is that at some point, the bill was going to come due. Is that the state of Maryland and Maryland taxpayers were going to have to pay for these projects and these expenditures. So I don't know what they were thinking inside the Department of Transportation that they were going to get away with this because at some point we were going to find out, and it was probably going to be at a time where we're talking about another transportation trust fund deficit that's actually growing.
When it comes to the TTF, a lot of projects are funded out of this, and that's where a lot of the conversation starts about these projects that have already been greenlit. Do you think Marylanders will be on the hook for additional funding to kind of backfill this gap that we now know is perhaps larger than what people were expecting?
Almost certainly, because, we've talked about the federal government not sending as much money to the states, and Department of Transportation Secretary in Washington, D.C., that's reluctant to fund a lot of projects. So I think that this is inevitably going to be the conclusion. And where this is going is that the state of Maryland is going to have to do this because they've signed these contracts, they've moved forward with these expenses, and you just can't leave people hanging. And, part of this is that they were claiming, and when I say they, the Department of Transportation, they were claiming that revenue was coming in, and it was not. And we're talking revenue of more than $400 million. And this is just, it's not just bad accounting. It's really just, it's accounting that is deceitful and trying to hide what's happening inside the state of Maryland.
We got a statement from the Attorney General's office. Anthony Brown's office says that this is something that needs to be handled within the Office of Legislative Audits or even the administration, that this isn't something for them to look into, even though we know Republicans are calling for the AG's office to launch an investigation. Is this something that Governor Moore needs to take a look at and really have a serious conversation with taxpayers about what's happening?
Immediately. The conversation needs to happen immediately. And there needs to be an audit. There needs to be a deep investigation by the Attorney General. And not only that, is when there are findings and when they find out what happened, taxpayers need to know. We need to know exactly how this happened, why it happened, and there have to be repercussions. So if you have a list of people that were involved in this, there has to be repercussions for their actions. We can't just ignore this report and move on because it's going to happen again. And that's why you have to have strong and serious repercussions.
All right, we'll see what comes out of this. David Williams from the Taxpayers Protection Alliance, thank you so much, as always.
Thank you.
This week, we asked what grade you would give Maryland's budget and why. We'll take a look at some of your responses right after the break.
Here's tonight's primetime lineup on Fox 45. Brought to you locally by your McDonald's owner-operators.
Len Stoller's Drive Into Fall event has Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo 4x4s for just $359 a month. And Chrysler Pacifica Selects are just $449 a month right now at Len Stoller Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Westminster.
When you say let's go to breakfast, you mean let's go to McDonald's. Obviously.
With McValue at McDonald's, get a pumpkin spice iced coffee for 99 cents.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Toyota reliability for all your adventures. Built to perform, born to thrill. Toyota RAV4. Find yourself discovering more. Buy yours now and save with low 4.75% APR financing. Toyota, let's go places.
At Bob's, furniture heroes like Michael train our associates to help you find your dream furniture, like the Playdate with hidden storage, pop-up sleeper, and USB ports without being pushy or salesy. Because we're here to help, not sell.
Oh, my Bob!
Bob's Discount Furniture. With depression, it feels like every day you're just going through the motions. But what if you could get your go back?
Go with Auvelity.
Auvelity worked fast. Some saw relief in as early as 1 week. And Auvelity lasted. On average, significant relief was seen at 6 weeks. Antidepressants may increase suicidal thoughts and actions in young adults. Tell your doctor about sudden changes to mood, thoughts, or behavior. Don't take Auvelity if you have a history of seizure, eating disorder, or have abruptly stopped drinking alcohol, or taking benzodiazepines, barbiturates, or anti-seizure medicine. Serious allergic reactions can occur. Don't take if you're allergic to dextromethorphan, bupropion, or any of the ingredients in Auvelity. Don't take with MAOIs. High blood pressure, manic episodes, serious eye problems, and dizziness can occur. Report all medicines you take to avoid a life-threatening condition. Don't take Auvelity if you are or may become pregnant. Side effects can include dizziness, headache, diarrhea, feeling sleepy, dry mouth, sexual function problems, and excessive sweating. Ask your provider about Auvelity.
Go with Auvelity.
The Drive Into Fall event at Len Stoller has Ram 1500 Bighorn 4x4s for just $489 a month. And Dodge Hornet RT all-wheel drives? Now just $139 a month at Len Stoller Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram Westminster.
This week, we asked what grade you would give Maryland's budget and why. Let's take a look at what some of you had to say, and almost everybody did not have much nice things to say. We had Cliff, who says, how about C for corruption? Larry says D for disaster. Elijah says not great. Tim says F unless there is a lower grade. John says when you go from a budget surplus to a budget deficit, you have earned an F. That's it for this week's edition of Fox 45 News in Depth. I'm Mackenzie Frost. Hey, I'm Mackenzie Frost. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Check out Fox Baltimore on all of our social media pages for more videos just like this.